Ibrahim Traoré's most trusted man disappears, then resurfaces with $5 million and a choice. The news rippled through Ouagadougou like wildfire in the dry season. Colonel Kaboré, the shadow behind President Ibrahim Traoré's throne, had vanished. 3 days without a trace. 3 days of whispers growing louder in the streets and corridors of power. Military vehicles crisscrossed the capital's dusty arteries as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across government buildings. Inside the presidential palace, aides moved with the nervous energy of worker ants whose hill had been disturbed. President Traoré, the young, charismatic military leader who had seized power to save the nation, stood motionless at his office window, watching the convoy below with eyes that betrayed nothing and saw everything. "Mr. President," his secretary's voice trembled slightly, "the Security Council is assembled." Traoré nodded without turning. The question hung unspoken in the air between them. How could the most protected man in Burkina Faso, after the president himself, simply disappear? Kaboré, his strategist, his confidant, his brother-in-arms since their days at the military academy, the man who knew all Traoré's secrets, who had access to every classified document, who could move soldiers with a whispered word. 3 days after his disappearance, as the president prepared to name a new second-in-command, the call came. Kaboré had resurfaced with $5 million in cash, and an offer that would test the very foundation of Traoré's revolution. Before we continue, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. 15 years earlier, Kaboré had been just another cadet at the military academy, the son of a subsistence farmer who'd earned his place through a scholarship and sheer determination. Ibrahim Traoré was different. The son of a well-connected government official, a young man who could have chosen any career but felt drawn to military service. They should have occupied different worlds even within the academy walls, but fate had other plans. "You fight like you're afraid of losing something," Traoré had told Kaboré after watching him dominate the combat training exercise. Despite being outweighed by every opponent, "I am," Kaboré had replied without smiling. Everything. That honesty had sparked an unlikely friendship that transcended the invisible barriers of class and connection. Where Traoré was bold and charismatic, Kaboré was methodical and perceptive. They complemented each other perfectly, rising through the ranks together, until the moment 2 years ago when Traoré decided the country's corrupt leadership had to fall. Kaboré had been there through it all. The planning, the coup, the difficult early days of the new government when foreign powers circled like vultures, hoping the young administration would fail. And now he was gone. President Traoré entered the secluded estate on the outskirts of Ouagadougou alone. Against his security team's frantic protests, the villa belonged to an elderly businessman who had supported their revolution from the shadows. The garden was lush, incongruously green against the dusty landscape beyond its walls, filled with the sweet scent of frangipani blossoms. Kaboré waited beside the ornamental pool, still in his military uniform though it bore the subtle signs of hard wear. His usually immaculate appearance had given way to 3 days' stubble and dark circles under his eyes, but it was his expression that caught Traoré's attention. Not guilt or fear, but a burning intensity. "You should have brought guards," Kaboré said. "If what I fear is true, they wouldn't help me," Traoré replied, stopping several paces away. "And if what I hope is true, I wouldn't need them." Between them on the stone table lay a metal briefcase and a thick manila envelope. Kaboré gestured toward them, without touching either. $5 million in unmarked, non-sequential bills, he said, his voice low and steady, and evidence of why it was offered to me. Traoré didn't move toward the case. By whom? By those who believe everything has a price, those who see our revolution as an inconvenience to their profits. Kaboré's fingers rested lightly on the envelope. Mining interests backed by our former colonial masters and their new Eastern competitors. They approached me 3 months ago, offering exile in luxury if I would help destabilize your government.
And you disappeared to meet with them?
The hurt in Traoré's voice was barely perceptible, masked by presidential authority. I disappeared to spring the trap they've been laying since before we took power. Kaboré finally allowed exhaustion to show in the slump of his shoulders. I didn't betray you, my president. I went deeper into the darkness to find our true enemies. He slid the envelope across the table. Now you face a choice. Use this money to build the schools and hospitals we promised our people. Money that could save lives immediately, or expose the conspiracy behind it and risk everything we've built. His eyes, bloodshot but unwavering, met Traoré's. Either choice has consequences. Neither of us may survive. The weight of the decision seemed to press the very air from the garden. As Traoré reached for the envelope, the first move in a game where every piece was already in motion. Dawn broke over Ouagadougou, painting the dust-laden air in shades of amber and gold. In the presidential residence, Ibrahim Traoré hadn't slept. The documents from Kaboré's envelope lay spread across his desk: offshore banking transactions, meeting transcripts, surveillance photos, and most damning of all, a detailed plan to systematically undermine his government through strategic corruptions of key officials. This money, Traoré said, tapping a manicured finger against one particular document, it comes from Glencore Mining's subsidiary. Kaboré, who had spent the night in a guest room under discreet guard, nodded. They've been extracting gold from our soil for decades. Now they're pivoting to rare earth minerals, the elements needed for all modern technology. Their new mines would displace 3 villages in the northeast. Villages I promised would receive clean water systems this year. Traoré's voice remained level, but his eyes betrayed his anger. And they thought buying you was their path to approval. They didn't approach me directly. They used intermediaries, French businessmen with diplomatic connections, the same people who host our finance minister when he travels to Paris. The implication hung in the air between them. Finance Minister Adama Ouedraogo, educated at the Sorbonne, impeccably dressed, with connections throughout West Africa's financial world, had been instrumental in stabilizing the economy after the coup. His defection would be devastating. I need proof before I accuse a member of my cabinet, Traoré said. That's why I accepted their initial overture, Kaboré said, sliding another document forward. They believe I'm considering their offer. They've scheduled another meeting in 2 days, this time with their principal backers present. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lieutenant Fatima Zida entered, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She came from a military family, 3rd generation with a reputation for uncompromising honesty. Mr. President, she said with a formal salute, I have the surveillance report you requested. She hesitated, eyes flickering to Kaboré. Should I return later? Stay, Lieutenant, Traoré said. What did you find? She placed a flash drive on the desk. Colonel Kaboré has been meeting with foreign nationals for the past 3 months, mostly at the French Cultural Center or the Golden Tulip Hotel. Always in public spaces, always briefly. Her voice remained professional, but her posture radiated tension. The most recent meeting was with this man. She showed them a photo on her tablet. A silver-haired man with an aristocratic bearing, dressed in a linen suit that probably cost more than most Burkina earned in a year. François Leroy, Kaboré identified him. Cultural attaché at the French embassy. In reality, he coordinates intelligence operations across the Sahel region. You knew you were being watched? Zida asked, surprise breaking through her professional demeanor. I counted on it, Kaboré replied. I needed someone trustworthy to document these meetings. Someone who wouldn't be compromised. He looked meaningfully at Traoré. Someone who would report directly to you. Traoré studied Lieutenant Zida with new interest. And what conclusion did you draw from your surveillance, Lieutenant? That Colonel Kaboré was either a traitor or running a counterintelligence operation without proper authorization. Her gaze remained steady. I prepared files for both possibilities. Your thoroughness is commendable. Traoré said, now I need your discretion as well. No one outside this room can know about these meetings or these documents. Not yet. By mid-afternoon, the presidential compound hummed with activity. Traoré had called an emergency cabinet meeting under the pretext of addressing recent border skirmishes. In reality, he was watching his ministers, particularly Ouedraogo, who spoke passionately about the need for international investment in Burkina Faso's infrastructure. Our revolution promised progress, Ouedraogo said, his French-accented voice carrying authority. But progress requires capital. We cannot build a new nation on ideology alone. And where do you suggest we find this capital, Minister? Traoré asked, his tone casual though his eyes were sharp. I've been developing relationships with several European investment groups. They understand our unique situation and are willing to work with flexible terms. After the meeting, Traoré summoned his most trusted advisors to a smaller, more secure room. Besides Kaboré and Lieutenant Zida, there was only Hamidou, an elderly man who represented no ministry, but came from the president's home village. His presence often confused foreign diplomats, but those who understood Burkina Faso's culture recognized that his role as a traditional elder gave him a different kind of authority, the kind that remembered colonialists and coup leaders alike. What did the old ones say about the hyena? Hamidou asked after hearing their evidence against the finance minister. That he laughs while planning where to bite, Traoré replied. Ouedraogo smiles too much when he speaks of these foreign friends. The old man observed. I have seen his type before. Men who think they can serve two masters, their people and their own ambitions. We need to be certain, Kaboré cautioned. This could be exactly what our enemies want to make us suspicious of each other, to fracture our leadership from within. Then we will test him, Traoré decided. Lieutenant Zida, arrange for information about a new rare earth mineral discovery near Po, to reach the finance minister, but no one else. Tell him it's being kept confidential until we can secure the proper development partners. A trap, Zida nodded in understanding. Kaboré, attend your meeting as planned. Express interest in their offer, but make no commitments. We need to identify everyone involved in this conspiracy. Later that evening, as darkness fell over the capital, Traoré visited the home of his finance minister, unannounced. The guards at Ouedraogo's gate were surprised, but admitted him immediately. The minister lived well. His home boasted imported furniture, a swimming pool, and artwork from European galleries. He welcomed Traoré with practiced charm, offering imported whiskey, which the president declined. I prefer our local Dolo beer, Traoré said, watching Ouedraogo carefully. It reminds me who I serve. Of course, though I'm afraid I don't keep any here, Ouedraogo replied with a slight smile. What brings you to my home so late, Mr. President? I've been thinking about what you said regarding international investment. Perhaps you're right. We need to be more open to certain opportunities. Something flickered in Ouedraogo's eyes. Satisfaction, quickly masked. I'm pleased to hear that. I actually have a meeting tomorrow with representatives who might be interested in our agricultural sector. French representatives? Traoré asked, innocently. Among others, Ouedraogo confirmed. Regional development benefits from diverse partnerships. When Traoré left an hour later, he was certain the information about the fictional mineral discovery near Po had not been mentioned once during their conversation. The following day, Lieutenant Zida reported that Ouedraogo had made 3 international calls immediately after Traoré's departure, 1 to Paris, 1 to London, and 1 to a satellite phone, whose signal originated in the mining region near the Mali border. As Kaboré prepared for his meeting with the conspirators, Traoré summoned him to the palace gardens, a place they knew was free from electronic surveillance. If I move against Ouedraogo now, we tip our hand, Traoré said, watching a chameleon slowly make its way along a branch. We might catch one traitor, but lose the opportunity to uncover the entire network. And if you wait, you risk giving them time to act first. Kaboré countered. The fact that they approached me means they're accelerating their timeline. What do they want from you specifically? Access to military deployments, the ability to create security incidents, that would justify bringing in foreign peacekeepers. Eventually, your schedule and security protocols. Kaboré's voice remained matter-of-fact. But his hands had tightened into fists. They want what every colonial power has always wanted. Our resources without our resistance. A silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the city. Go to your meeting, Traoré finally said. Tell them you want proof of their good faith, half the money now, half when you deliver the first piece of intelligence. We'll track the money, identify their local assets." His gaze hardened. "And then we'll show them what resistance truly means." As Traoré studied the documents Kaboré had risked his life to obtain, the presidential compound's security alarms suddenly blared to life. Through his window he could see armed men in military uniforms moving across the grounds, their weapons raised. Lieutenant Zida burst into his office, her sidearm drawn. "Mr. President," she said urgently, "Finance Minister Ibrahim Traoré has just entered the compound with a special security team. He says he has evidence of treason against Colonel Kaboré." The presidential compound transformed into a chessboard of moving soldiers, some loyal to Traoré, others following Finance Minister Traoré's orders. In the central courtyard, two groups faced each other, weapons not yet raised, but hands hovering near triggers. The afternoon heat seemed to intensify the tension, sweat glistening on foreheads as men and women wondered who might become their enemies in the next moment. Ouedraogo strode across the courtyard with the confidence of a man who believed victory was already his. 6 armed guards flanked him, their uniforms bearing the insignia of the Presidential Security Regiment. Men who should have been protecting Traoré, not escorting the finance minister on what amounted to an internal coup. "Mr. President," Ouedraogo called out as Traoré emerged from the main building with Lieutenant Zida at his side. "I come with grave news. Colonel Kaboré has betrayed Burkina Faso." He held up a tablet. "We have evidence of his meetings with foreign interests, accepting payments to undermine our government." Murmurs spread through the assembled soldiers. Kaboré's disappearance had already fueled rumors. This accusation seemed to confirm the worst. "Serious allegations, Minister," Traoré replied, his voice carrying across the courtyard with calm authority. "Especially coming from you." He turned to address the soldiers. "Before anyone makes a decision they cannot unmake, I suggest we all view the evidence together." He gestured toward the main conference room. Ouedraogo hesitated, clearly preferring the advantage of armed men in an open space to the confines of a meeting room. "Unless," Traoré added with dangerous softness, "the evidence doesn't bear close examination." Pride forced Ouedraogo's hand. "By all means, Mr. President." Inside the conference room, tension crackled like static electricity. Ouedraogo's security detail positioned themselves strategically, while Lieutenant Zida had quietly assembled a group of officers whose loyalty to Traoré was unquestioned. They stood at the back of the room, watchful. Ouedraogo connected his tablet to the conference room's main screen. These were taken over the past 3 months, he explained as surveillance photos appeared, showing Kaboré meeting with various European men in cafes, hotel lobbies, and once in a parked car. Colonel Kaboré has met with known intelligence operatives from France, Britain, and private security firms linked to mining interests. The evidence looked damning, exactly as Kaboré had intended it to. "And this," Ouedraogo continued, playing an audio recording, "was captured just yesterday." A voice that was unmistakably Kaboré's filled the room. "I can provide the security protocols for the president's convoy by tomorrow. After that, the choice of action is yours." A second voice, heavily accented, "Excellent. The remaining payment will be transferred as discussed." Ouedraogo paused the recording, looking triumphant. "There's more, but I believe this establishes the colonel's guilt beyond question." Traoré studied the faces in the room, his officers processing this apparent betrayal. Ouedraogo's men tense, but confident. "Minister Ouedraogo," Traoré said, "where did you obtain this evidence?" "From our intelligence services, of course." "Strange," Traoré replied, "since I ordered all surveillance of Colonel Kaboré to report directly to me." He turned to Lieutenant Zida. "Lieutenant, please share your report with the minister." Zida stepped forward, connecting her own device to the system. "This is the complete surveillance record of Colonel Kaboré's activities," she said, bringing up a far more extensive set of photos, videos, and transcripts. "As ordered by President Traoré, I personally oversaw this operation after the first contact was made by foreign agents. New images appeared, the same meetings from different angles, but also what happened before and after. Kaboré meeting with Traoré between these encounters. Kaboré leaving written reports at dead drops collected by Zida's team. Colonel Kaboré was operating under direct presidential authority. Zida continued, conducting a counterintelligence operation to identify foreign attempts to infiltrate our government. Ouedraogo's confidence faltered visibly.
This could easily be fabricated.
The conference room doors opened, and Kaboré himself entered. His timing, as always, was impeccable. "Minister," he said, nodding to Ouedraogo with chilling politeness. "I believe you were expecting me to be at the Golden Tulip Hotel right now, selling out my president and my country." Before Ouedraogo could respond, Kaboré turned to Traoré. The meeting was very informative. "Mr. President, the French attaché Leroy was there, along with representatives from 3 mining corporations. They were most disappointed when I arrived without the security protocols." His eyes locked on Ouedraogo. They mentioned that their other asset had assured them I was fully committed. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Ouedraogo's security detail exchanged uneasy glances, sensing they had backed the wrong faction. "This is absurd," Ouedraogo blustered. But his voice had lost its authority. "They're clearly working together." "Lieutenant," Traoré interrupted, "please show us the information about Minister Ouedraogo's recent communications." New data appeared on the screen. Phone records, banking transactions, and most damning of all, recordings of Ouedraogo himself speaking with the same European voices who had approached Kaboré. "We've been monitoring all cabinet communications since these approaches began," Traoré explained, each word deliberate and weighted with authority. "Standard security protocol during times of foreign interference." He turned to Ouedraogo's security detail. "Your minister has been selling access to Burkina Faso's mineral wealth at prices that would leave our people in poverty for generations. He has coordinated with foreign interests to undermine the sovereignty we fought for, and now he attempts to remove me using the very evidence we gathered against him." The security commander stepped forward. His decision made, "Minister Ouedraogo, you are under arrest for treason against the Republic of Burkina Faso." "You can't," Ouedraogo began, but fell silent as his own men moved to restrain him. 30 minutes later, after Ouedraogo had been taken to a secure facility, Traoré addressed the nation from his office. Kaboré stood silently beside him as he revealed the conspiracy that had been unfolding. The attempts by foreign corporations backed by former colonial powers to control Burkina Faso's resources and influence its government through bribery and coercion. "Today we uncovered evidence that some among us, those who enjoyed privilege and position, were willing to sell our future," Traoré said, his eyes fixed on the camera with unwavering intensity. "But we also discovered the true strength of our revolution. The loyalty of those who remember what it means to struggle, who know the price of freedom because they have paid it with their own sacrifices." He gestured to the documents spread before him. "These papers reveal a network of corruption extending beyond our borders, implicating officials not just in our government but in neighboring countries as well. Some of these officials were my appointments. People I trusted." The admission clearly pained him, but he continued without flinching. "Some were friends. All will face justice." As the broadcast continued, Kaboré studied Traoré's face, recognizing the weight of the choice that still lay before him. The documents they had uncovered implicated more than just Ouedraogo. They revealed connections to military officers, tribal leaders, and even revolutionary comrades, who had fought alongside them for change, but had later succumbed to temptation. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Traoré slumped slightly in his chair. "How deep does this go?" he asked quietly. "At least 3 other ministers," Kaboré replied. 7 military commanders, dozens of lower officials. He placed a hand on Traoré's shoulder, a gesture that would have been unthinkable in public, but spoke to their decades of friendship. "This is the true test of our revolution. Ibrahim, not taking power, but using it justly, even against our own." Traoré straightened, reaching for the list of names. "A revolution built on lies becomes the very system it sought to replace," he said, his voice heavy with resolve. "Our people deserve truth, whatever comes after." The decision made, he began writing orders for arrests that would shake the foundation of his own government, choosing transparency over stability, justice over convenience. Outside his window, the sun was setting over Ouagadougou, casting long shadows across a city that would wake to a transformed reality. The arrests came at dawn. Across Ouagadougou, military vehicles moved with quiet efficiency, collecting ministers, officers, and officials whose names appeared in the conspiracy documents. There was no resistance. The precision of the operation and the overwhelming evidence left little room for defiance. By mid-morning, 17 people were in custody, including 3 cabinet ministers and the head of the National Mining Authority. At the French embassy, chaos reigned. Cultural attaché François Leroy had vanished overnight, leaving behind emptied filing cabinets and wiped computers. The ambassador was summoned to the presidential palace, where he found not Traoré but Kaboré waiting, stone-faced and unreadable. "This is an outrageous violation of diplomatic norms," the ambassador blustered, though his complexion had gone pale upon seeing the documents laid out before him, documents bearing official French government seals, alongside mining company letterheads. "We considered declaring your entire diplomatic mission persona non grata," Kaboré replied, his tone clinical. President Traoré opted for a more measured approach. 16 of your staff will leave Burkina Faso within 24 hours. Your mining contracts will be reviewed by an international panel for evidence of corruption, and your government will formally acknowledge its attempt to interfere in our sovereign affairs. Or, the ambassador asked, or these documents go public, and the world sees exactly how the former colonial power attempted to reclaim through corruption what it lost. Through independence. Kaboré slid a prepared statement across the table. Your choice, Monsieur Ambassador. 3 days later, the French diplomatic corps was significantly smaller, and a terse statement from Paris expressed regret for unauthorized activities by certain elements operating without governmental approval. No one in Burkina Faso believed it, but the admission itself was unprecedented. Meanwhile, Traoré addressed the complexities of justice. Those who had accepted minor bribes or played small roles in the conspiracy were offered amnesty in exchange for testimony. Several came forward, providing even more evidence of how systematic the attempt to control Burkina Faso's resources had been. "We cannot build a nation by feeding our own to the lions," Traoré explained when some of his more hardline supporters called for harsher punishment. "Those who were deceived deserve a path back to honor." The most difficult decisions concerned the $5 million that had been intended as Kaboré's bribe. The money sat in the presidential compound's secure room, still in its original briefcase. A temptation and a test. Traoré called a small council meeting, just Kaboré, Lieutenant Zida, and village elder Hamidou, to determine its fate. "The practical choice is clear," Kaboré said, ever the strategist. $5 million could build schools, clinics, water systems. Using it would save lives immediately. "The ethical choice is also clear," Zida countered, her military bearing emphasizing her conviction. "This is blood money. Using it taints everything we build with it." Hamidou had remained silent, listening to the younger leader's debate. When he finally spoke, his weathered voice commanded attention through its quiet dignity. "When I was a boy," he said, "a thief stole my father's goats. The chief caught him and returned the goats to us, but my father refused to take them back. He said food that comes through dishonest means poisons the body and the spirit." The old man's eyes, clouded with cataracts but still sharp with wisdom, fixed on Traoré. But he also said that poison can become medicine in the right hands. Traoré understood. The next day, he announced the creation of a national transparency fund. The $5 million would become the foundation, but with a crucial difference. Every citizen would have a voice in how it was spent. Village councils would propose projects, and a national committee of respected elders and youth representatives would allocate the resources. Every expense would be published publicly. "This money came to us through corruption," Traoré declared. "We will transform it through transparency." For Lieutenant Fatima Zida, the aftermath brought unexpected changes. Her unwavering loyalty and exceptional work during the investigation earned her promotion to the head of military intelligence, replacing a general who had been implicated in the conspiracy. At 34, she became the youngest person and first woman to hold the position.
You understand what's truly at stake, Traoré told her during the private ceremony in his office. Not power or position, but the future we promised our people.
Zida accepted the new insignia with characteristic directness.
Thank you, Mr. President. I won't forget who I serve.
As she left the office, she passed Kaboré in the hallway. Something had shifted between them. Mutual respect forged through shared struggle. He nodded to her new rank. "Well deserved, General. I learned from watching you, Colonel," she replied. "Sometimes loyalty requires disobedience." A ghost of a smile crossed his usually impassive face. Indeed, later that evening, Traoré and Kaboré walked together through a poor quarter of Ouagadougou without security or ceremony. They wore civilian clothes, moving anonymously among the people they had fought to liberate. Street vendors recognized them occasionally, offering free food which they politely declined, paying instead with folded bills from their own pockets. "Do you remember what you told me at the academy?" Traoré asked, as they paused to watch children playing soccer with a ball made of plastic bags and string. "That you fought like you were afraid of losing everything." "I remember," Kaboré nodded. "I never truly understood until this week. I was born into comfort, into connections. Even our revolution came relatively easily." Traoré's eyes followed the children, who played with fierce joy despite their poverty. "I never had to fear losing everything, until I realized how close we came to betraying everything we promised these children." "And now?" Kaboré asked. "Now I understand why you were willing to risk being seen as a traitor. Why you endured suspicion and isolation to protect what matters." Traoré turned to his friend, the setting sun casting long shadows between them. "Because some things are worth losing everything for." They continued walking as darkness fell over the city, discussing the challenges ahead. The mining corporations would not abandon their plans easily. Other officials might still be compromised. The path to true independence would remain difficult. Yet something fundamental had changed. The conspiracy that had intended to divide them had instead forged stronger bonds of trust. Not blind loyalty based on friendship, but tested commitment to shared principles. As they parted ways at a crossroads, the city lights blinking on around them, both men carried the quiet certainty that their revolution had faced its greatest test and emerged stronger. And in a small village near the northern border, where the Transparency Committee had approved its first project, a medical clinic that would serve 3 communities, the elders gathered to discuss what this might mean for their children's future. Among them was a young teacher who had returned from the capital with news of the government's struggle against corruption. "The president could have kept this money secret," she explained. "Instead, he gave its power to the people." An old woman, bent with age but sharp with experience, nodded slowly. "Then perhaps this revolution is different from the others we have seen come and go," she said. "Perhaps this time, the promises will not fade with the morning dew." 6 months passed, like rainfall on parched earth, quickly absorbed by a nation hungry for transformation. In the village of Kongoussi, 200 kilometers north of Ouagadougou, crowds gathered for the inauguration of a medical clinic built with the first allocation from the Transparency Fund. Women in vibrant traditional cloth created rivers of color alongside men in both Western and traditional dress. Children darted between adults, their excitement palpable. The clinic itself was modest, but modern. Solar panels glinted on the roof. A deep well promised clean water, and a small pharmacy stocked with essential medicines stood ready to serve 3 communities that had previously traveled hours for basic healthcare. Outside, a simple plaque read, "Built by the people of Burkina Faso, for the people of Burkina Faso." President Traoré arrived with minimal security and maximum purpose. Gone was the military uniform he had worn during the early days of his rule, replaced by a simple white boubou that connected him to centuries of West African tradition. He moved through the crowd shaking hands, listening to stories, kneeling to speak with elderly villagers who couldn't stand to greet him. Kaboré accompanied him, still vigilant but somehow changed. The hardness in his eyes had softened, not with complacency, but with the quiet satisfaction of seeing long-held dreams taking physical form. This village was where his parents had been born, where he had spent childhood summers, learning the value of community and the sting of having no doctor when illness struck. Few in the crowd knew this connection. Kaboré had never been one to speak of personal matters, but Traoré knew, which was why this clinic had been prioritized. "Your father would be proud," Traoré said quietly as they prepared for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Kaboré nodded once, emotion briefly visible in the tightening of his jaw. He died, believing nothing would ever change. "And you?" "I live knowing that change is possible, but never guaranteed." His gaze swept across the gathered villagers. "These people don't need heroes or saviors. They need leaders who remember where they came from." The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful. After Traoré cut the ribbon, he stepped aside, allowing the village elder, a woman whose lined face had witnessed decades of broken promises from previous regimes, to be the first to enter. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. Inside, as villagers explored their new clinic with a mixture of awe and ownership, Lieutenant General Zida approached with a tablet computer. "Mr. President," she said, her formality masking urgency, "we've just received intelligence from Mali. The mining consortium has restructured under a new name and approached their government with similar proposals. Already testing whether we stand alone," Traoré observed. "They've also made contact with Finance Minister Ouedraogo." She added, her voice lowered. "In prison?" Kaboré asked sharply.
Zida nodded. "He's been allowed visitors from his family. We believe messages are being passed."
Traoré absorbed this information without visible reaction, though his eyes briefly met Kaboré's in shared understanding. Their victory had been significant, but not complete. Perhaps it never would be. Later, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting the village in gold, Traoré addressed the gathered community. He spoke not of politics or international conspiracy, but of what the clinic represented: healthcare as a right, not a privilege, development directed by those it served, the transformation of corruption into construction. "This building stands because you demanded it," he told them. "Not through violence or protest, but through participation in your own governance. The world remains filled with those who see Africa only as a resource to be extracted. They see our minerals, our forests, our labor, but never our humanity." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Today, we show them something different. When they offered bribes, we built clinics. When they sought division, we found unity. When they expected corruption, we delivered transparency." As darkness fell, lanterns and solar lights illuminated the village square. Musicians began playing traditional instruments, and children led their elders in dance. Among them moved a man few recognized, a former finance minister now serving his sentence through community service, rather than mere imprisonment. Ouedraogo, once resplendent in tailored suits, now wore the simple clothes of a laborer. His task was humble, assisting the elderly and disabled, carrying water, serving food to others before himself. Kaboré watched him from the shadows. "Do you think he's learned anything?" he asked Traoré, who stood beside him. "I think he's beginning to," Traoré replied. "True humility comes slowly to those born to privilege." "Like you?" Kaboré asked, the ghost of a smile creasing his face. Traoré laughed softly. "I had excellent teachers." As the celebration continued around them, they moved to a quiet spot beneath a baobab tree at the village edge. The ancient tree had witnessed generations of struggle and survival, its massive trunk a testament to endurance. "We've made progress," Traoré said, gazing up at stars emerging in the darkening sky. "But the challenges remain. The mining interests will try again. Foreign powers still see us as their chessboard." "And internally?" Kaboré asked. 6 cabinet members replaced, 17 military officers reassigned, a government restructured. Traoré sighed. "The hardest part isn't catching traitors. It's building a system that doesn't create them." They sat in contemplative silence until a villager approached with glasses of locally brewed millet beer. After she left, they raised their drinks in a silent toast, not to victory, but to vigilance. "In the academy," Kaboré said, "you once asked me what I fought for. You said everything," Traoré remembered. "Now I know what that means," Kaboré replied, gesturing toward the celebration. The clinic, the village that had raised him, not power or position. The night deepened around them, the stars of the Sahel brilliant overhead. In the distance, the celebration continued. Not for the president or his trusted colonel, but for the small victory of a village finally seen and heard by its own government. In a nation built on gold, the most valuable currency remains trust. As the two men walked back toward the lights and music, a messenger approached with an envelope bearing no return address or official seal. Kaboré intercepted it, his security instincts never truly at rest. Inside was a single photograph, a mining executive shaking hands with a military officer from a neighboring country, and coordinates written in a familiar hand. Their fight was far from over. But for tonight, they allowed themselves to join the celebration. Two friends who had journeyed from academy cadets to revolutionary leaders, who had faced betrayal and conspiracy, and who had discovered that the true revolution wasn't in seizing power, but in transforming how it was used. The village danced. The clinic stood ready to heal, and somewhere in the darkness beyond their borders, new challengers gathered. But here, under stars that had witnessed empire and independence, struggle and triumph, something had changed that could not be undone. The quiet revolution of expectations fulfilled, of promises kept, of power returned to those it was meant to serve. Did this story touch your heart? Has something similar ever happened to you, or someone you know? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you enjoyed this journey of transformation and discovery, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that reveal the truth about human connection, dignity, and the unexpected moments that change lives forever. Every like, comment, and share helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments.